Paganism is aptly described by the Germans as natural religion, in the sense that it is not artificial, but grows up unobserved and uncriticized, like language. Like language, however, it is contagious, and the gestures, local cults, and stories of wonders and visions are seen and heard as they are enacted or repeated, with a sense that some magic or numinous influence envelops them. But these cults are local and ritualistic. The myths that are suggested by them are freely varied, essentially political and fabulous. The sources of these magic influences are represented sometimes as animals, sometimes as human beings, but always more elusive in their substance and apparition. They are therefore splendid subjects for myths and oracular admonitions, representing secret fears or hopes of perturbed minds. And the growth of natural religion of this kind has become complex and precise in any people. Critics will not be someday wanting that will criticize that fantastic tradition, either deriding it altogether as moonshine, or denouncing some elements in it as unworthy of others, which are declared sacred. The complete skeptics have little political importance, although they never cease to reappear sporadically, or in little groups of moralists or scientific observers who think themselves absolutely right, and the contrary errors of mankind disastrous. Local pagan deities and rites may sincerely respect one another, but when zealous souls, far from abandoning their traditional religion, undertake to reform or transform it so as to render it true and perfect, then faith in it becomes militant, and the practice and advocacy of it a positive social enterprise. The previously innocent pagan practices and doctrines, having now challenged and condemned all others, have taken up arms in at least verbal defense of their singular claims. Here we have a church militant, but that is only a forced and incidental turn of private zeal, and rather poisons than purifies the positive, poetical, ascetic, and spiritual side of pagan worship. Moreover, it is a dangerous procedure for the fundamental tenets which are assumed by both sides in such a controversy, because the arguments and evidences invoked against the heretics may very easily be applied eventually to the orthodoxy that they retain, and thereby also to the foundations of the conservative position. The career of religious reform, with its triumphs, self-purifications, sudden new inspirations, and ultimate, unforeseen alternative results, may be studied to unparalleled advantage in the book of Genesis and the whole Bible, including the origin of the Christian Church, to which the history of Islam and of Protestantism can be easily appended. The other great religions in Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and China seem not to have been militant, although their philosophers sometimes advocate sharply their personal moral sentiments or schemes of salvation, as if no other was possible. However this may be, I think the lesson of these Oriental religions may be gathered by philosophy better than by any theological eclecticism. And what is philosophy? As a governance and appreciation of life, except religion liberated from groundless fear or anxiety, that is to say, from superstition, and also from rage and honest illusions. Now, the Hebrews, or children of Abraham, were not at all Orientals in being given to speculation, but an ordinary nomadic tribe with a tribal patron. It is intelligible that a wandering people should not attach their patron deity to any spot, but rather to the fortunes of his people. Changes in their fortunes will be due to their right or wrong conduct towards God, who yet will lead the faithful in the end to conquer and possess forever a land flowing with milk and honey. For this tribe had never, as far as their traditions reported their past, lived in the depths of Arabia or in the vast wilderness of Central Asia, but rather on the borders of highly civilized and populous nations like Babylonia and Egypt. They exchanged their pastoral produce for the grain and luxuries of those countries, and in these contexts they would have heard, perhaps with wonder, of their cosmic speculations and cosmic deities. The Hebrews were too tightly bound to the worship of their one celestial patron, for it was there that he sometimes appeared, and from there that he spoke to them, to be attracted to the strange gods and their monstrous images. And they had never much regarded the gods of other nations, except to admonish themselves not to worship them, and to trust in the power and will of Yahweh to protect them always. Yet those stories of the creation of the world and of the universal flood, and the notion of a deity ruling all nature and all nations, may well have impressed them, so much so that, attributed to their own God, they could accept them without disloyalty. For how, indeed, could Jehovah control the fortress of his people unless he was master also of all other nations and all other gods? In that case, it became sacrilege even for these other nations to worship any god but the God of Abraham and of Isaac, who had appealed to Jacob and made with him at Bethel that memorable contract. It must be, in fine, the whole universe that was guided and planned for the glory and for the chastisement of Israel. All nations were destined to recognize him and the special authority of his people and his law, so that Israel, by right of divine grace, was the one appointed teacher and master of all mankind, and God would one day send his anointed to make that right effective. It is only by a slight and automatic change of locus and names that this formidable doctrine has passed to the two international and interracial religions that, as religions, are derived from Israel, Christianity and Islam, which, in the claim to supernatural universal authority, are continuations of Judaism. Yet these two, by their diversified and much richer contacts with the Gentile world, have become social, political, and moral forms of culture, no less than of religion. Islam, in particular, although initially a religious gospel, at once became a military mission of conquest and domination, with special legislation, oriental and subtropical in character, to be imposed on all believers. And belief itself was to be imposed on pain of death on all conquered peoples, unless being Jews or Christians, they were already men of the book and could be tolerated and protected in their special faiths, though not admitted to military or judicial functions. This system produced a specialized civilization which had brilliant moments of Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordova, and later several centuries of wide but sleepy and imperfect domination under the Turks. But a militant religion is an embarrassing heritage for nations compelled to live under the tense, noisy, and restless pressure of the modern world. Although if this pressure subsides, oases might remain in the desert, where that rare seed might again take root and come to flower. But its tribal pride, deepened more than shaken by its sufferings, has prevented it either from merging with the Gentiles or from gathering them in large numbers into its own pale. The truth is that their religion, after its two chief treasures, monarchical theism and the scriptures, have been incorporated in other religions, remains distinctive enough by its exclusions to segregate them in the midst of a modern society that they love. But that is not distinctive enough in its religion to attract religious minds. And how many of them are orthodox enough in their own hearts, if they got complete possession of Jerusalem, to rebuild the temple of Solomon, or even of Herod, and to restore all its ornaments and ceremonies, with all the prescriptions for private life, or the book of Leviticus? If you remove the cult in the temple, the observance of the Sabbath and the feast, and the miraculous tales in the Bible, what will remain in Judaism that, say, Protestant Christianity does not contain, greatly expurgated and universalized? Liberal Jews are simply humanitarians and positivists. The religion of Israel is for them what Catholicism was to come. The free-thinking modern Jew may be an artist, a capitalist, a philanthropist, or a communist. His militant soul has outgrown religion without finding philosophy or peace. The militant enterprise of the Catholic Church in the modern world is particularly interesting and instructive. two different fountains, both springing up spontaneously in the human soul, itself a living compound of contraries, unite in inspiring and rationalizing this religion. The first fountain is the pure doctrine of the gospel that can be practiced only after the manner of John the Baptist and the hermits in the desert, or when they turn towards mankind in the homeless missionary little band of Jesus and his disciples, which with the growth of numbers cannot avoid special settlements in various cities or in monasteries in the country, combining the little necessary tilling of the soil with much building and much praying. But evidently, this truly evangelical life can be led only by a few selective communities, where each individual has heard a special call, and all are celibate, merely waiting for the second coming of the Lord, either publicly with trumpets to judge the world and bring it to an end, or privately to each soul for its sanctification. The laity that is converted to this doctrine cannot be required to reproduce its discipline, but by a distinction between universal commandments and evangelical counsels, they will be encouraged to live in the spirit of chastity, poverty, and obedience as far as their station and duties in the world permit, and a great tolerance will be shown to human weakness, intellectual as well as moral, so long as it is admitted to be weakness, and not defended as manly and enlightened. Catholic morality is therefore easily compatible with any form of civil or military government that does not itself impose a different religion or morality, but attends to the things that are Caesar's with a benevolent smile at the taste of mankind in mystical matters, even a hostile theocracy, if it recognize the Catholic minority as a separate people and allow them their own language, religion, education, and laws of marriage and inheritance can be passively endured without any rebellious impulses. But the position of a Catholic party in a modern constitutional democracy where the majority has socialistic leanings and wants to organize, equalize, and train everybody, making them all unanimous, is a difficult and embarrassing one. Christianity is revealed in militant religion. It would die out at once if it were not expressly inculcated, and although its followers might be dragooned into a political party as they might into a regiment, they would submit only professionally, under compulsion, reserving for the religion their only real allegiance. How genuinely and fruitfully Catholicism can be fused into a rich human civilization becomes clear when we consider the other fountain of its inspiration, namely Hellenism. And for Catholics, this is not, as for Protestants, an appendage, almost a treason to their Christianity, but a spontaneous, genial, and poetical way of being Christians. This is, in spirit, more marked in the Eastern Church, where Hellenism is native, than in the Western, although even here, through the Greek fathers, Plato, and Aristotle, it is no less traditional, and even more warmly embraced and popular, as in the case of sacred icons and statues, and the Hebrew scriptures themselves, after the conquest of Alexander, have been divided into Hellenistic kingdoms. There appears a mature philosophy, freely speculative, in Job and Ecclesiastes, while in the Alexandrian wisdom books a salacious knowledge of the world abounds, such as we see opinionated old men in the plays of Terence, rivaling each other in propounding. Nor did the fathers and apologists of the Church, in the least, hesitate to employ pagan philosophy and eloquence in the service of their cause, nor the councils and the popes to outdo the Neoplatonists in the refinements of theological speculation, or the other popular cults in the elaboration of pious legends and feasts. It was not by quitting their special revelation that Christians assimilated their piety to that of other men, but by introducing the same humanity into their own, as indeed was already done for them, radically and in principle, by the cardinal tenet of their faith, namely, the incarnation of God in man. Humanism was in fact so deeply interfused with religion in the Catholic mind that it is precisely in the most Catholic ages that it flourished most, and that a sort of paralysis fell on both, if either was muted. The ages of the Crusades were those of chivalry. The Don Quixote felt no discord, but a mutual sanction in being loyal to both at once. And yet, a philosophical critic, spelling out his ideas from the letter of books, would have told him that chivalry, with its magic and giants and unauthorized adventures, was a heathen superstition, fostering conceit, pride, and absurd combativeness in a clown masquerading as a hero. But Don Quixote, who read books with the imagination, would have replied, "No, no act could be more Christian than to defend the weak from the unjust aggression of the strong, and to turn the thoughts from carnal desires to an ideal and religious love. Compare with this the extraordinary cult of the Virgin Mary, inspired first by profound meditation on the mystery of the Incarnation, reported in the Gospels, and itself the taproot of the Christian faith. But this implication was fed and humanized by ambient religious sentiments regarding virginity and also motherhood, popular myths concerning the mother of gods, and Diana of the Ephesians, and perhaps also by atavistic memories of matriarchal authority and government, and the vague mystical intuition of God and man, latent everywhere, became concrete and at once homely and sacred, and consecrated in the figure of God and Jesus, and consequently hidden but actual, once in the womb and always in the heart of Mary. It was also easier to believe in a divine providence overruling the incidents of daily life, if even small favors could be mediated, as at the marriage in Cana, by a sigh at some domestic worry, or a tender sympathy with childish hearts. I doubt that, in any age, a mature philosophy can have avoided the conviction that it is such humble human models that the religious imagination has enlarged into propitious or hostile social giants, visiting angels, heroic messiahs, mendicant prophets, and domestic, wonder-working saints. But if Hellenism, in its devotion to Theotokos, had made Hebraic religion at once speculative and humble, there could be no longer any quarrel between Christianity and the interludes of gaiety, poetry, splendor, and refinement. These things can never be made pervasive or constant in human life, which can never radically control the physical world or its own irrational growths. But like religion itself, worldly fortunes can be cultivated at the right season in many various places and ways, of which Catholic civilization gives brilliant, though troubled, and tragic examples. In Byzantium, and more varied in the West, where the 13th century perfected ecclesiastical philosophy and architecture, and the 15th century a pure Renaissance, which the 17th sublimated into majesty, magnificence, and Baroque exuberance. There have been a lack of exuberance of other less monumental sorts throughout the Middle Ages. Heraldry shows it to the eye, spreading into costume, sculpture, romantic, fabulous histories, and grotesque popular shows, and the unbridled fancy of religious sects and speculations. Heresies were, indeed, often cruelly thrust, but chiefly when they involved social and political rebellion. Towards the ideal play of thought and language, there was a great indulgence, and laughter rang as loud as the clash of arms and the screams and curses of the tortured. It was a rough existence, struggling and playing close to the ground, but even in the persecution which it authorized, religion was an exalting admonition from powers behind the scenes, in whose presence the passing passions lost their finality. As ritual candles at a wedding or a funeral, lighted in the glare of day, carry the crude event into another world, where it has another meaning. Much as the mention of ancient sorrows and glories by the chorus in a Greek play removes the too great horror of the present tragedy, together with all else that is accidental and transitory, into a realm where everything coexists and has become a perfect monument to itself. Certainly, it is no relief to a man in agony to be told that the sky sometimes blue, and that the stars, though usually hidden, are always shining. And these platitudes are no justification for the torments he suffers or for those who impose them. Existence is irrational, and so is the love of it. And while we exist, we cannot escape either. Yet man has also a spirit capable of being speculative and disinterested whenever the pressure of hostile circumstances or vicious passion is relaxed. At such times, all things seem to speak to that spirit in its native language. Tragedies become poems, the hopes and sorrows of the world become arguments for religion. Evils remain as bad as ever for the natural man, but for the spirit in him, they are transformed. What was a predicament becomes a vista. What was a puzzle becomes a truth. You have begun to live in a new way, just as natural if you are a thinking man, and much less disturbed. It is what society loses if it discards the liberal arts or the liberating side of religion and philosophy. On the militant side, however, these speculative gifts and ideal systems only overload the weight of scientific and historical knowledge with arbitrary explanations which multiply unnecessary doubts and quarrels about optional doctrine and about groundless duties and prohibitions in action.